This is a video reply to some comments I've already replied to, but basically I wanted to go over this stuff in a video form. And I don't know, I thought about summarizing it, tying it all together. But really I think I'll just go through it, sort of as the conversation went. It's with Beethoven's Seventh, and he asked if I had watched the ARI lecture he sent to me on the topic of Native American ownership of the land. And I told him, yes, that I thought it was full of a lot of updated versions of it was good for them, and they didn't really own it anyway, in terms of Native Americans owning the land, because I'm presenting this dichotomy of, there's property rights advocates, property right activist types among libertarians and anarchists. They very much believe they own this property. But they came in after this organized system of the United States government came in and got the property. Basically, they joined up with what they call organized crime, took the property, and now they want to say they're too good for that system. Basically, that's my accusation. He says property rights, as far as land goes, derive from creating value out of the land. Okay, that's a principle that you should frame, because I mean this is what we may agree or disagree with. That's the point, is that when we break morality down, we get some sort of principles that we can agree or disagree. Now, is this and if we disagree, then it has to be something we're worth fighting for. Do property rights go from creating value out of the land? I don't think that's so easy. I mean, what if you simply derive value from the land, like we've been talking about nomads that hunt the land? You're going to have to try to define creating value, and I think if you derive any value, that's enough now. But it's not quite enough to justify private property, because if you derive value from land, well, everybody can derive value from something they use. It doesn't make it their property, obviously. He says most of the natives were nomads and didn't do that. Well, you have, I think, a lot of stereotypical ideas of what most Native Americans were. Actually, there were very many different kinds of cultures. But even in the case of the nomads, I don't, again, see how you can't say they didn't create value. Or I'd like you to define what it takes to create value. I mean, what if they burned an area, or did, some sort of control, or were conscious in the way that they culled from the herd, making it more healthy rather than less, or anything like this? What would constitute creating value on that land? You claimed that many of the tribes were basically dictatorships. I just challenge you historically to demonstrate that. I don't believe that's true. I believe that tribal situations, there's many different kinds of tribal situations, and many of them are loose enough, and that, if you were good at hunting and you went out hunting, people would follow you out there, and you could be the leader in that. If you focused on other skills, healing or creating something, you would probably lead the effort to, make that device or do that healing. And that's quite possible. Some tribal situations got very rigidly organized, especially as they get bigger and bigger. But as they get bigger and bigger, we don't really think of them as tribal. They become more urbanized. Even though it's a culturally specific, form of an urban environment. But so, I think that tribes do tend to be personally oppressive, in the sense that you're living in close proximity with the other people from the time you're an infant all the way through your life. And people end up pigeonholing you. Mistakes you made when you're 7 or 10 might become more part of your reputation than they do in our more modern environment. And that could be personally oppressive, but it wasn't oppressive in the same sense of a top-down hierarchy where it was very clear what your role was in that hierarchy. No, there's pecking orders, but they're much more the unstated, informal pecking order of social cliques. That's my position. So what I was really talking about is that, objectivism has a mixture, capital O objectivism, has this weird mixture where it believes in objective best answers. So in any given situation, there's the objectively right thing for someone to do. But it says that the individual should go ahead and make those decisions. An objective philosophy goes more hand in hand with, top-down control, where the individual doesn't get to decide. Because If it's possible to figure out the best thing for the person to do, why not make them do that? If you get into a philosophy that wants to put the power of deciding that in the hands of the individual, you're much better off with a relativistic philosophy that says that you really have to be in that position to make that judgment. And that acknowledges that there can be different roles or different answers to the problems that people face when you're looking at them from different points of view. If I say, I can argue to someone else that it's wrong to steal because if they're honest, they don't want to be stolen from. So I can say, well, we should be consistent, and I should say we should be, honest about our consistency, and so therefore, you shouldn't want stealing either. And that's convincing to a lot of people. But some people can easily say, well, I don't have to be consistent. I don't value being consistent. I don't value being honest. And what can I really do in that situation? I cannot convince them of such a basic thing. That's something you either agree to or not agree to. I can't actually break it down and try to convince them, but I'll be breaking down some other principle. That, well, hey, if you're not consistent, people won't be consistent with you. And I can't try to make arguments for those principles, but ultimately, I'll just be using still more primitive principles. And if we're going to disagree on those at some point, we just have to know which we personally believe, but more importantly, what we're willing to do in a situation, what we're willing to fight for. So the question of morality ceases if somebody says, I don't believe in honesty. The question of morality ceases to be the same sort of thing. Instead of what's right or wrong, that the answers to that break down, because he says, oh, it's right to lie. And I say, it's not right. The question becomes, what are we going to do about it? I'm going to use my morality in that situation as to tell me what to do when he lies to me. Okay, the morality, that's what I mean when I say my morality is something I use to help me figure out what I should do in a situation. It's not to figure out what's right and wrong per se. That's an artifact. That's one way of looking at it. But that's like talking about the symptoms. What's actually going on is this is a program in my mind, this morality, a kind of software that partially built in, partially learned, partially who knows how the software is written, but it's software that's helping me decide what to do. And so if somebody believes that doesn't believe honesty is of value, then we're not going to, the morality breaks down as something where I can insist that this is the right thing. Because he gets to make that individual, since I'm a relativist, he gets to make that individual decision for himself if he doesn't think honesty is of value. But I still have to decide what I'm going to do about his dishonesty. And morality still plays a role in that. For me, my morality, just as his morality is playing a role in his decision not to worry about being honest. So that's why I think of morality in terms of what should we do in a given situation, and why I think morality works out, even though ultimately it is a very harsh truth that morality breaks down into what you're willing to fight for. If you're willing to defend fairness or honesty or being consistent or logical or any of these things in a social context, then that is what's going to underpin your morality, where you're willing to take a stand on something when you do disagree with someone else. And that's why we have to be very careful. Some people think, well, then this kind of relativism, you could just believe anything you're willing to fight for. Like, you believe you should have all the candy, so you steal it and you're willing to fight for it to make some more. Well, in a sense, but luckily people don't really think that way. I'm not going to stand behind a principle of, I'm willing to fight for the fact that I should have all the candy and nobody else should have any. No, I'm willing to fight for the fight for the right to stop people from stealing from me. I'm willing to fight for the right for people not to be subject to violence from someone else just because the other person is mightier. I'm willing to fight actually for a lot more reasonable things, and most people are. Most people don't want to fight just so that they can have an unfair advantage. They're really willing to fight when they've been subject to an unfair disadvantage. So, I think objectivity, capital O, objectivity has a little bit of a problem in this area where, if you can find objective answers, then why are you going to leave it to the individual? The reason we really have to leave it to an individual is because individuals really do have the right to make the final decisions on these principles. Things like, is it of value to be honest? I think that it is.